Now we're going to share the screen right now. We're going to be sharing the screen right here. Okay. Here we go. All right. We are ready to begin our discussion of this beautiful Mishnah that we started talking about last night. Very difficult Mishnah in a way. We say, Kol Yisrael Yeshem Chelik L'Olam Haba. All of Israel has a share in the world to come. In the world to come, Shenemar, as it says in Yeshaya, Va'amech Kulam Tzadikim, your entire nation is righteous. La'olam Yershu Oretz, they shall forever inherit the land. Neitzer Mato'ai, they are the branch of my planting. Ma'aseh Yodai Lehispa'er, they are the work of my hand, says Hashem, that I may be glorified, which of course implies that the Jewish people's responsibility is to bring a Kiddush Hashem and to glorify Hashem's name. And anything we do that sanctifies Hashem's name is fulfillment of this pasuk in Yeshaya. Our Mishnah is the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Perik Sheni, Mishnah Ches. And the Mishnah says as follows. Hu ha'ya omer. Hillel is still talking, and he always said, Marbe basa marbe rima. If you increase flesh, meaning the more you eat, the more worms you increase. And we explained yesterday that rima also means trickery. And what you're doing is you're fooling yourself because you're tricking yourself into thinking that that's a good life, when in reality, it can only lead to destruction. Marbe nechasim, marbe daiga. We're in the middle of discussing that particular statement. The more one increases property, the more worry one has. And we mentioned the Gemara on Tes Zayin Amud Aleph in Beya, which it says that Mezonosov shel Adam Kitsuvim lo me Rosh Hashanah ad Rosh Hashanah chutz, except for what he spends for Shabbos, Yom Tov, and for sending his children to yeshiva, because the more you spend on Shabbos and Yom Tov, the more you're going to be given, as we're going to see later on in another Gemara. And now comes the third statement. Mar ben noshim, mar b'kshafim. If you
Rabbi, excuse me. Could one who accumulates wealth has more worries? Is that because he'd be worried about losing his money, constantly be looking around that either someone will take advantage of him or the competition, and he's always worried that all that money will be lost?
Yeah, Henech, that could very well be. And we discussed some of those aspects last night. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor, please. I understand you do have a lot of questions, and they're usually very good. And in fact, they're always good. But I'd like you to be patient. And if you can, wait till the end of the Shiur so that we can cover the basic ground. And then I'll leave you a few moments if you have any further questions. Is that okay?
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make it clear. Unless it's something that can't possibly wait. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So now, the third statement is Marbe Noshim, Marbe Kshafim. The more you increase women, the more witchcraft you increase. And as we said yesterday, that in those days, the majority of witches were in fact women. But what it means for us today, we'll discuss. Marbe Shvachos, Marbe Zima, if you increase maidservants, you're going to increase more immorality. Marbe Avodim, Marbe Gezel, if you increase male servants, you're going, and they are Avodim Kananim, you're going to increase thievery, and we'll see what that means. However, the opposite also holds true. And these statements are corresponding to the previous statements. Marbe Torah, Marbe Chaim. The more you increase the study of Torah, the more you increase life. Marbe Yeshiva, Marbe Chochma. The more you sit in the Beis Medrash, the more wisdom you're going to acquire. And when we said Marbe, by the way, people, please remember, it doesn't mean just having a lot. It means constantly working for the next level to increase. One of the things I often emphasize, and I was taught this by my holy Rebbes is that we have to do everything we can to grow and get a little bit better. We should never be so satisfied that we say to ourselves, that's it, I'm done. There was a book when I was a youngster, I remember that they came out with a book, I'm okay, you're okay. As long as you walk around thinking you're okay, you're okay. It's not so. If a person is stagnating and standing still while the world is still going on, you're losing it. You're falling behind. The Gemara uses the terminology, Im ta'azveni yom, the pasuk says, if you leave me one day, yomayim azveka, I will leave you for 2 days. What does this mean? It means if two people are standing together and each one takes a step, they are now 2 steps apart. We can't say, I'm okay. We could say, I'm trying to be okay, and I hope I'm okay, but I'm not stopping here. And it could be that for 1 day or 2 days, I've got to work, or even for a year. Could very well be for a year, one has to work at one particular midah. Here's the way it works. It comes Rosh Hashanah, and you're thinking about the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and you go through the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and it comes Yom Kippur. And when it comes Yom Kippur, you're hoping that the resolutions, the New Year's resolutions that you made, you're going to fulfill. Here's the suggestion. During the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, pick one thing, just one. You pick whichever one you want. I'm not saying that there's one that's better than another. Some suggestions if you'd like. Pick one that's easy. Pick one you're not doing that's relatively easy. I often recommend the simple mitzvah of I'm not going to eat anything without saying a bracha before and after. Simple. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it's not an overburdening thing like conquering the Yetzer Hara. It's just saying thanks to Hashem for everything we have. Every time we eat something, that's all. Just do that. So what do? You take a piece of paper in the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, and you write down, I hereby make a New Year's resolution, B'li neder, right? B'li neder, that I'm going to say a bracha before and after I eat something. The appropriate bracha before I eat and after I eat something. Take that paper, fold it up, put it in an envelope. All right? Seal the envelope. Write on the envelope to be opened on Hanukkah. To be opened on Hanukkah. So you have Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev. You have 3 months, because Hanukkah is the end of Kislev. 3 months later, you open up the envelope. Now, if you kept the resolution, you're going to open that envelope and you're going to have the greatest gift on earth. You're going to get a Hanukkah present that you're going to treasure. I did it. I took one small, easy mitzvah that I was neglecting, or I wasn't really neglecting, but I wasn't so careful about, whatever it is. I'm just giving you an example. This is not to say that God forbid anyone is in this category. I'm just giving you an example. And I open it up and I smile. And the smile is from deep, deep, deep within, because I've just given myself a tremendous gift, a great gift. If you chose something else, if you chose the mitzvah, I am going to say Good Shabbos before the other person says Good Shabbos. I'm going to say good morning before the other person says good morning. I'm going to visit one sick person a week. I'm just giving you suggestions. Anything is good. Anything. You write it down and you put it in an envelope. And if you did it, you're going to open that up on Hanukkah. You're going to have the greatest Hanukkah present you ever had in your life. Because what Hillel is saying here is that when you're marbe Torah, marbe Chaim, marbe Yeshiva, marbe Chochmah, when you increase goodness, you are giving yourself the greatest gift. Well, God forbid, if you're increasing physical possessions that you think are the purpose of life, you're going to be sorely disappointed. Because, and I don't want to be morbid, but the reality is, shrouds have no pockets. You can't take it with you. It doesn't exist. You can't amass a fortune, tell them to put it in the coffin, and when you get before the Borei Olam, you take out the $1 million you made and give it to him and say, I got $1 million, here, let me in. Are you kidding? Your money is worthless here. It has no value. Bring me some mitzvahs. Let me see something worthwhile. So that's what Hillel's saying. Marbe Yeshiva, Marbe Chochmah. Marbe Eitzah, if you increase advice, asking advice. Marbe Tevuna, you're going to increase wisdom and understanding. Marbe Tzedakah, you increase charity. Marbe Shalom, you're going to increase peace in the world. Kana Shem Tov, if you acquire a good name. Kana La'atzmo, you got it for yourself. And the word Atzmo comes from the word Etzem, which means bones. You get a good name, it's in your bones. Kana Lo Divrei Torah, if you acquire words of Torah, Kana Lo Chaye Olam Haba, then you're going to acquire a life in the world to come. Now, we began to say that the 5 things that are listed at the beginning are all of a physical nature. And they go according to the way a person is born. The first thing a person does when they're born, as we said yesterday, is achila. Therefore, Hillel warns, marbe basa, marbe rima. The second thing, when you get a little bit older, and now you're beyond the difficult teenage years, or even while you're in the teenage years, the next step, of course, is marbe nechasim. You want money. Everybody wants money. But that increases marbe daiga. That's only going to bring about a lot more worry. After that, you got enough money, so the desire now is for physical pleasure. And so you want to use your money to acquire all the physical pleasures you possibly can have. And that's why Hillel said, marbe noshim, marbe kshafim. Because if you have a yetzer hara and you're going to allow the pursuit of the carnal pleasures to make it your life, that's only going to bring about that there's going to be more witchcraft. And I'll explain that later. Marbe shvachos, if you increase maid servants so that you don't have to do anything, you can lay around all day and have them fan you while someone lowers the cluster of grapes into your mouth while you're sitting on the veranda of the beachfront house. You're going to marbe zima. You know, if a person doesn't do anything, immorality steps in. You have nothing to do all day, your mind is going to go to total waste and immorality. And the same thing goes for marbe avodim, marbe gezel, as we'll explain in a minute. Let's get to try to a little bit more understand the concept of marbe nechas and marbe daiga. Now, there's a good chance we're not going to finish this whole Mishnah tonight, but that's okay. The next time we learn Perek Sheni will continue from where we leave off. I always make a note of where we leave off, and we over the years we've been considering that every week and doing it. So now let's go back. Mar ben nechasim, mar bedaika. The more nechasim you have, the more worry you have. As Henoch mentioned before, you're worried you're going to lose it. You know, first of all, you never really get satisfied. You're just never really satisfied. The Medrash in Koheles says, Yesh lo mana, if you have 100, Rotze Mosayim, you want 200. Yesh lo Mosayim, you have 200, you want 400. It's never ending, never ending. People go around saying, you know, if I had X amount of dollars, I'd be fine. It's not always so. I think for some people that's so, and we're going to see which people those are. But the derech klal, in a general rule, people who think that by amassing more, they're going to be satisfied, most are not. We have to be satisfied with what we have, with the hope that if Hashem sees fit to give us more, we'll know how to utilize that challenge. Many Rabbanim of today are under the impression that one of the greatest challenges to the Jewish community today is the challenge of wealth. We are an extremely wealthy people. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about the way the lowly anti-Semites say we're the richest people on earth. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, let's think about this, people. Let's think about it. Are we not perhaps the richest Jewish community in the history of the diaspora? Ever since we've been sent into exile? Is it not so that we are perhaps the richest Jewish community? Even the average, so-called average moneymaker, think about what we have. Here it comes. The food we eat and that we spend our money on, the average middle class Jew in the United States of America has the ability to purchase, acquire, and eat the most abundant food Jews have had throughout history. It was only 80 years ago that if you had a potato for supper, you were considered blessed. I remember, I've said this at the Shiur in the shul. I remember when I was about, 12 years old, and I davened in the shul across the street with my father, Zechron Levracha, in the Bialystok shul on the Lower East Side. And we lived on the second floor in the 500 Grand Street, Building C, and next to us lived a Rebbe who escaped the Holocaust, one of the brothers of the Golitzer dynasty. And the Rebbetzin used to come into my apartment to speak with my mother. My mother spoke a perfect Yiddish, and the Rebbetzin would speak to her, even though my mother was born in America, but her mother spoke to her Yiddish, spoke to me Yiddish. And my mother spoke a perfect Yiddish, and this woman would come and speak to every Friday night when we went to shul. She would come in and talk to my mother. And they had nice discussions. She was an intelligent, sweet lady. And my mother and her became friendly. I came home one Friday night a little earlier than my father. My father was standing outside the shul talking with some of the balabatim of the shul. And he said, oh, you can go upstairs. Tell mommy I'll be up in a minute. I came upstairs. I opened the door. And this woman is crying her head off. This Rebbetzin is bawling like a 9-year-old, crying her head off. I never saw an adult cry like that. I was taken aback. And I said to my mother, Ma, what happened? What's wrong? She said, no, nothing. I said, what? Nothing? What do you mean nothing? She's crying her head off. She's not doing it for nothing. What I said, I'll tell you later. The later came, and I said, okay, Ma, why was she crying? She said, well, it goes back to when they lived in Russia. I said, so what happened? So my mother told me. She was afraid to tell me because you don't want to injure a tender American 12-year-old's mind. She said, they had no food. And they used to fight over a potato. If someone got a potato, the townsfolk would say, it's mine. They'd grab it. They'd fight over it. One potato. Siberia was so cold. People lost their legs, their lives. We don't know anything about this. We have no connection with this. What do we know about persecution? Okay, none of us are happy about riots against Jews. But it's like a joke compared to the endless litany of Jew hatred and anti-Semitism and persecution and murder and pillage and plunder, of burning down of entire Jewish communities, of hangings, of slaughterings. We know nothing about this. Nothing. So we are an extremely wealthy community. And therefore, along comes Hillel and he says, if you're going to spend a life of Mar ben Nechasim, you're not going to be satisfied. You're going to want more and more and more, and that's only going to bring daga. It's only going to bring worry. You don't need it. You don't want it. It's not for you. So don't be Mar ben Nechasim. Don't increase Nechasim. I want to bring a share to this particular piece that we just learned. This Gemara in Beitza on Daf Tes Vav Amud Beis, the beginning of the second parak in Beya, Yom Tov Shechol Yos B'Shabbos, and we're going to go down to the bottom of the page. Watch my hand on the screen. Ve'omer Rabbi Yochanan. I hope you see it. I want to show you this unbelievable statement in the Gemara. Ve'omer Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Eliezer bar Shimon. In the name of Rabbi Eliezer bar Shimon, Harotze sheyiskaimu nechasav. If someone wants that his property should be upstanding, it should be mekayim, it should have a kiyum, it should have an established kiyum, that it should last forever, and you're alive, and very possibly even beyond your life. So Harod says she is kaimu nechasav. If someone wants that his property should have an established quality, yita bahen eder. Plant an eder tree. Plant an eder tree. Rashi explains an eder tree was a very beautiful, well-known tree. If you put a tree, an eder tree in your property, everybody would know it belongs to you. They couldn't steal it because you had this beautiful eder tree. Okay, that's the way Rashi explains it, right? If you take a look right over here, that hand is over in the Gilyon Hashas, he quotes the Aruch, and the Aruch says, it's hard for you to see, it's very small, but the Aruch says an eder tree means nothing more than giving tzedakah. Give tzedakah. If you have a fortune and you want the money to be established and lasting, give tzedakah, and then it's going to last. I want to give you another definition before we get back to the tzedakah. This is my own personal idea. Harot says she is kaimu nechasav yita bahen eder. I'm going to read that other. If you want your properties to have established quality, Yita behen Adar. Mishenichnas Adar ma'bin b'simcha. Live a life of simchas achayim. Live a life of simchas mitzvah. If you live a life of simchas mitzvah and simchas achayim, as the Gemara now quotes a pasuk, Adir b'morom Hashem, Adir from the word Eder and Ador, up in heaven, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Adir. He has this tree, or he has this simcha. That's an interpretation. But as we said, the Aruch says that Adir or Eder means tzedakah. I want to tell you an unbelievable story. For those of you who know, one of the greatest philanthropists of the last few hundred years, as far as the Jewish people are concerned, was a very, very frum man. His name was Moses Montefiore. Moses Montefiore lived a ripe, long life. He died at the age of 101. He was born in 1784, and he died in 1885. Moses Montefiore was so wealthy that in his lifetime, he actually made 7 trips to Eretz Yisrael and built the first community outside the walls of the old city, which is a beautiful community known as Mishkenot Sha'ananim. When he built it, of course, it was small little huts. And today, each of those little huts is over $1 million, maybe $2 million already. It's unbelievable. It's a colony of artists mainly, but there are very interesting people living there. And of course, the famous windmill that he built is there. And he built vineyards. He planted vineyards. He built cities. He built so much. Moses Montefiore was one of the wealthiest men on earth. He built a mansion in England where he lived. It was called Ringsgate. In that mansion, attached to it, not on the property, he built a beautiful shul. And next to the shul, amazingly, he built a building that was a replica of Kever Rachel. He was so enamored with the building of Kever Rachel when he went to daven there, he took the image back with him and had his architects and builders build mamish a replica of Kever Rachel on his property. It's right next to the shul in Ringsgate. Now, he left in his will provision that the shul should be sustained with 10 scholars learning all the time. B'nai yeshiva. They should sit and learn Torah all the time in that shul. And he set aside an amount of money that he hoped would last forever. I want you to know an interesting thing. Today, there are 10 young Avreichim, Kollel Jungelite, that are sitting in that shul and are learning every single day and are being supported by the money that Moses Montefiore left over to sustain the Kollel people who learned in that shul. Moses Montefiore wanted that his property should be established. So Yitaba had Eder. He did what the Aruch said. He established tzedakah, but that's not all. There's a famous story, and it's on websites throughout. You can take a look if you want. I saw 2 different versions of this story. I knew the story for many, many years. I had heard it from a responsible Rav. I don't remember who it was, but I remember it was a very responsible person who told the story. And I always wanted to check it out and factualize it, because stories come and stories go. And there are actually 2 versions of this. I'm going to tell you both versions. One version is that Queen Victoria to whom he was quite close because she always sought his advice, because he always came up with good, solid eitzah, with good advice, both in terms of the economy and the Queen's exchequer, and also just in general. One day, Queen Victoria called him in and said to him, Moses, everyone loves you. Everyone knows you're one of the wealthiest people in the whole world. Tell me, Moses, how much are you worth? He said, it's hard for me to tell you al regel achas, on one foot. I need some time to go and look through my books and my records and speak to my accountants and lawyers so I can come back and give you a fair figure. Give me a week or so, and I'll come back and I'll let you know. A few days later, a week later, whatever it was, he comes back and the Queen says, so Moses, do you have an answer for me on what you're worth? So he quotes a figure of $10 million. Now, Moses Montefiore was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe more than billions of dollars. He was one of the richest men on earth. So the Queen says to him, Moses, you Jews, you're always joking. Everyone knows that's a fraction of what you're worth. How could you tell me you're only worth $10 million when everyone knows you have at least 100, maybe 200 million? How could you say such a thing? He said to her, my dear Queen, you didn't ask me how much money is in my account. You asked me what I'm worth. I'm only worth the charity that I gave. And the figure I gave you is the charity I've given. My 10%. That is the truth. I've given you what I'm worth because only the tzedakah is what I'm worth. Because he knew this Gemara. Because the Gemara said, if you want to establish your wealth, give tzedakah. And to this day, Moses Montefiore's tzedakah is standing those 10 or more yeshiva life. Unbelievable. It's more than 100 years later. It's 130 years later. And they're still living off it. Because that's what Moses Montefiore left. He had no children, but he had great deeds. And he's revered in the annals of Jewish history. He was a frum man. The Shomer Shabbos. Do you know that Moses Montefiore was elected as the sheriff of London? And he had a clause in his contract that he wouldn't have to walk into a church and that he wouldn't have to work on the Sabbath or Yom Tov. The man was a frum man. And he gave tzedakah unbelievably with great largesse. And so marbe nechasim, marbe daiga is only when you don't protect your nechasim. And here, Moses Montefiore protected his nechasim. And consequently, it lasts to this day. So when we talk about the concept of marbe nechasim, marbe daiga, what we're doing is recognizing the unbelievable power of protecting those nechasim through the building of an ador or an adir around our property by giving tzedakah. And the tzedakah we give stands us in good stead. That's something that's always ours. We take it with us. Shrouds have no pockets, but the neshama has the tzedakah. And the tzedakah precedes us before the heavenly throne. I want to do one more statement before everybody walks away a little bit, feeling that they are shortchanged, because the next statement is is really a difficult statement. So I want to speak about it so that we don't go away without at least trying to explain what Hillel meant when he said mar ben noshim, mar be kshofim. If you increase women in the household, you're going to increase witchcraft. So one of the things that the Jewish people are not ashamed to admit is that Hashem created us with a Yetzer Hara. The sooner we admit that we have a Yetzer Hara, the better off we're going to be in life, because we know that we can then deal with life by utilizing the Yetzer Hara to help us achieve our goals. The Yetzer Hara can be used to further the righteousness that Hashem wants from us. The Jewish people do not have any restrictions in terms of enjoying life. Wine, one must drink when it comes Shabbos to make Kiddush. And on Pesach, 4 cups of wine. In fact, if someone becomes a Nazir and stops drinking wine, he has to bring a korban chatos at the end of being a Nazir. And as the Gemara explains, Omer Rebbe Elazar HaKapar, why does he have to bring a korban chatos? Al shetzir atzmo min hayayin, because he held himself back from drinking wine. A Jew must do everything he and she can to marry, have a family. Under the chuppah, we say the bracha Yotzer Ha'adam. We do not look upon the mitzvah of having children as being a source of original sin. On the contrary, it's the way the Jewish people are built. It's the way the mitzvah of the continuation of the world goes on. It's not sinful or dirty or shameful. There is no physical pleasure in this world that is forbidden except the laws of kashrus. But as the Gemara in Chulin says, there is no flavor or taste that is not available in the kosher market, so to speak. And of course, today's markets prove it. But everything's permitted. In fact, the Rambam goes so far as to say that if someone knows of a desire and a pleasure that he can fulfill, and he doesn't in this world, it's a sin. You're supposed to enjoy life. You have to enjoy life. But you have to be aware that there is a Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara can lead you astray and veer you off the path of that righteousness. You could become bewitched by the desire of the Yetzer Hara. For 17 years, I was the principal of a school in Morris County. It's in Denville, New Jersey. It was called the Morris County High School for Jewish Studies. And I had about 100 students who came every Sunday morning. They were all from totally assimilated, non-observant homes, parents affiliated with the conservative and reform temples in the area. But I ran this little yeshiva here on Sunday mornings. I had 5 frum teachers. I think there were 3 women and 2 men at the time, and I was also one of the teachers. And we had about 100 students that we taught. Then I gave them an option for coming on Tuesday nights, an honors group, which I would bring supper for them from the kosher store in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I would bring supper for everybody from the pizza store because I was teaching in the yeshiva in Elizabeth at the daytime. I'd run up there on Tuesday nights. We had 2 hours together in which we eat dinner and discuss various topics. So one night, one of the students asked me and said, Rabbi, we're all in high school. Some of them were juniors, some of them were seniors. None of the sophomores were there because it was an optional thing, and only the better, out of the 100 students, we had 10 or 12 on a Tuesday night. It was a volunteer program. They came. And one of the students says, Rabbi, what is your opinion about dating at this age? And now here's a pit that you can fall into easily when you're dealing with these type of situations. And I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you tell me your experience and what do you think? So there were various opinions around the table, some very wild opinions that you would expect from a typical American Jewish audience that has very little mitzvah observance. And then there were some very interesting opinions. And there was one particular fellow, I'll never forget him. I don't know what he is today, but I'm sure he accomplished what he said he's going to be. He told me he was going to be a doctor. I'm sure he became a doctor. And I would bet a very good one too. He was quite bright. And he was a very likable fellow, very tall, very handsome, filled with personality. And some of the girls in the group wouldn't have minded if he was okay with dating, you know? And they asked him, Ben, what about you? Do you ever socially date? He said, no. And they said, why not? You're a handsome fellow, you're intelligent, you're wealthy, you want to be a doctor. Why don't you date? He said, I'll tell you why. I'm telling you the MS. He said truth. Yeah. I'm telling you the truth. There was a girl when I was a junior or sophomore, I don't remember what he said, that I was interested in. And we made up to go to a movie. And after a time, I realized, you know, when I'm around her, I don't think straight. I say things I don't really mean because I think she wants to hear them. I have these impulses which I'm not interested in indulging. And I feel like I'm not myself. I don't want to be a slave to these impulses and thoughts. And I'm thinking to myself when I'm listening to this guy, oh, if this guy would only go in a kollel and learn, he could be one of the Gedolei Hador. This is a pure soul who is on the mark. He hit it. He used the word, I feel like I'm bewitched when I'm around her. And that's what Hillel's talking about. Hillel is telling the MS. If your goal in life is to give in, and by the way, I know the ladies could say, yeah, but why does it say Noshim? Well, I don't mean to insult anybody, but the fact of the matter is that men have a bigger Yetzer Hara than women. Whatever you want to do with that, you can do with that. But that's a fact. And this pure soul was right on the mark. And he said it as straight out as you possibly can. And he was clear and honest. And that's what Hillel's saying. If you're going to increase the desire of the flesh, then what's going to happen is you're going to be bewitched, marbek shafim. You're not going to be able to think straight. Your life is not going to be one of caution, of thought, of planned purposefulness. You're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. And don't we know it? Don't we know it? So Rabbi Say, Hillel, of course, the brilliant sage that he was, gives us an introduction to all of these marbe situations. We have to stop here. We'll try to pick it up the next time we come to Perik Bays. We'll try to pick it up from here. Hopefully that will be when we're back in shul for our learning sessions on Shabbos afternoon. But if it's not, then we'll continue right here where we left off. And so,
Rebbe, can I ask you a question?
yeah, now you can ask, yes.
So if Marba Noshim means that it'll increase your Yetzer Hara, what's the difference? Why does the Mishnah have to talk about the shvachim, the maid servants will lead to zima? It's the same thing. So why does the Mishnah repeat itself?
It's not the same exact thing as I will point out in Yetz Hashem when we get to what zima means, because it's not the same thing. Okay?
Okay.
I'll point that out when we get to it, but it's not the same thing. But it's a good question.
Okay.
So
one more thing I want to say, Rebbe.
yes.
Doesn't it say Eze Asher Sameach B'Chelkoi?
Yes, it does. The beginning of Perek Dalet.
Right. So it that is also who's an Asher, not only what the money that he gave her to the, but is happy with what he has.
Yes, that was said by a different Tana. It's not a contradiction necessarily, but it's a bit of a different view, which of course, when we get to it, we'll discuss it then. But you're right. It's very much in line with what Hillel said, but that was talking about the way one should feel, while Hillel is talking about the eventuality of what will happen.
Shkoyach.
Okay.
Shkoyach, Rabbi.
Okay, so we are stopping the record. There are 3 wagons.